ultimately it leaves your victim questioning their own reality and questioning absolutely everything about them. It really it destroys your mental capacity.
In a world of hurt and pain, we find a way to break the chain, a caring heart, a guiding light, lead us through the darkest night. With preservation in our soul, we'll rescue those who've lost control, escape the grip of a narcissist on our journey to recovery bliss. Welcome to the Narcissist Abuse Recovery Channel with Jon and Padideh Jafari.
Padideh, it is so good to see you again. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good. It's good to see your smiling face. We were just talking about this offline a minute ago. I really miss you. It's like we've hardly seen each other or talked the last month or so. I know you were sick like forever.
Yeah, I was sick and then just getting through the holidays but yeah, I'm back and stronger than ever. So
Fantastic. And guess what this is? Season 5.
I know, amazing.
Can you believe that?
No,
Been doing it that long?
I
It's
can't.
crazy. It's crazy.
I'm actually at the OLS Media studio today
Oh, wonderful.
recording. And yes, and I was just talking with Lena, who is wonderful here.
They're amazing people there.
JC and Lena, shout out to them. And so
Yep.
she was like, I'm so proud of you guys. You guys are season 5. So
I
it's
know.
a big
We made it.
deal.
We made it over the hump, right? Didn't you tell me that most podcasts don't get beyond episode 20? And
Yes.
that would have been our 20th.
Yeah. So I'm really excited to
Good.
be doing this with my bestie. So
Yes. Amen to that. So good to see you. And we have kind of an interesting topic. I know we may have talked about this some, but really not in detail. But we wanted to talk today about how narcissists can kind of legit make you crazy.
yep.
And I'm not just talking about like crazy, I'm having a bad day. I'm talking about crazy, I'm having a bad life, and completely out there with respect to my thinking.
Yeah, I mean, crazy to the point of like wanting to be committed almost in a hospital to get away from them.
Yeah, my ex and her therapist actually were talking about doing that with me. So because I was not in a good place from all of the narcissistic abuse. So, and she found us a nice narcissistic therapist who who made my problems worse. So it was she was not willing to go deal with the narcissism in the room and wanted to continue to pretend, which ultimately made it an even worse deal. And when you've seen a therapist, and by the way, a lot of times therapists are not so helpful with respect to narcissistic abuse, especially if the narcissist is in the room. I think I'm in the place right now. The only real value I had in going and seeing a therapist was that my narcissist ex got diagnosed, which is unusual. But that was done also by a counselor who happened to also be a coach in a narcissistic abuse arena. So she was able to very quickly help me. Um, and ultimately, my narcissist ex left. She didn't want to counsel anyway. As soon as she found out that there was something wrong with her, she gone. So
Right. So these
so
are 2 different therapists you went to,
I
correct?
did, I did. I saw one up front more for marriage counseling, and I just realized that she was a narcissist and actually brought that to the table. And she said, "Yeah, we'll deal with that," and never did. She would tell me one thing privately to myself. She go, "Oh yeah, she's a narcissist. She's this, that. She's doing this and that." And then with her in the room, she would actually flip the script and she would completely change the story, and it was pretty ridiculous. I felt like that was part of the crazy making in my journey, was not just the abuse from my narcissist ex, but also from a therapist who I was speaking the truth to. My ex was lying in every which way, and and she was taking the side of my ex and would not deal with the deception. It was kind of crazy.
Wow. So it's like being gaslit by your therapist. And wow, I actually haven't heard this story before, so I'm just a little bit shocked. Um,
Yeah, yeah, I mean, ultimately, I'd figured out through this article that my ex was a narcissist. Like, that was my aha moment, somebody had sent me an article, and I read it by Shahida Arabi about, you know, 20 tactics of narcissistic abuse. And ultimately, I finally did get it, and I'm like, "Okay, this is what's going on, and I'd like to discuss this," and got there, and I told her also that I'd like to have both of us in the room because I felt like my narcissist ex would just lie. She'd been to therapists by herself for years, and I'm sure she would just say, "Well, my husband's mean. My husband's angry," without any of the side story and certainly her part of the equation. And I realized we weren't getting anywhere, so I'm like, "All right, fine, we need to go see somebody, we need to see somebody together." So I started there, and the lady said, "I'd really like to see you guys separately," and I'm like, "Yeah, I'm really not interested in that. We've wasted enough money on that already, and, I think we need to be together." She goes, "No, I'll make sure that it works out." And she saw my ex for 2 sessions, and she said she'd talk to me about it, and she didn't, so I called her and I said, "Hey, what's going on here? We haven't had a session." And she goes, "Well, I'm going to go do this the way I like, and if you don't like that, you can hit the road." "Oh, okay." So I hadn't really had much of a conversation with her except on the phone. And then it wound down to where we were together. She would tell me one story and would absolve my narcissist ex of all responsibility whatsoever. She would encourage the lying and deception. Even if I said this is a lie, "I don't care." So, and then when privately she would say, "Yeah, she's got personality distortions, and she's got something similar to narcissistic personality disorder." It was really kind of crazy. It was very crazy making in and of itself. And that's really kind of one of the things that brings a person to craziness is somebody saying one thing and doing another. And not only did I have that from one person, but I had it from two, and the second one was a therapist. So it was pretty wild.
yeah, I can just imagine. Oh my goodness. Wow.
Did you have any situations like that that kind of brought it over the top for you?
I mean, we had several different therapists throughout our relationship. We were together for 7 years, married for 4 of those, 7 years, and, it was just really tough because my ex-husband, looked good, and he always presented well and was very charming, and women liked him, and, I don't blame them. I mean, that's why I fell for him too,
Isn't
and
that the hard part right there? And I hate to interrupt, but I wanna pause at that. Narcissists look really charming and are attractive to the outside world. My narcissist ex looked the same to the therapist and to everybody else. And
right.
and meanwhile, you're in this relationship privately just dying, and that adds to the craziness.
Right. So the last therapist that I went to is when we had separated, and he was my therapist. And, he I had a couple sessions with him, and then he said, "I want to meet your soon to be ex husband," because we were still trying, right? Even though were separated, we were still trying. And he met him and one time, and then he said, "Okay, now, it's good to meet you finally, put a face to the name." And then after that, the next session, he told me, "You have to leave. You have to move." And I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "This man is going to kill you if you don't
Right,
move." And so I really do owe him my life. He has since passed away. His name is Dr. Shamsian. He's helped a lot of Iranian families, and did a lot of work with children with addiction and things like that. So I owe that man my life because no one had ever said that to me. And without him saying narcissism or anything like that, he was like, "No, this man is going to kill you." So I agree with you. I mean, I think, and we meet a lot of therapists too because of what we do in our
sure.
podcast, right? And some want to come on our podcast, and we need to vet them very well because they can be the narcissists themselves.
Absolutely. In my situation, in fact, I had a friend. This happened years later, but I had a friend who was a child of a narcissist who had actually seen this same therapist, and he goes, "Oh, she's horrible," and said, I could see why you had problems. She was the worst therapist I'd ever seen." And that, there were also helpful people out there, and I'm grateful for those, but they really helped me, they did not help her.
Right.
So when you get into this situation where there's triangulation, where you got 2 on 1, it also intensifies the feelings of actually going crazy. You go, "Well, there are 2 people here. They see that car is beige. I must be the one that's off. Does everybody see that car is beige?" And and you add that to gaslighting that's going on. Do you what how would you define gaslighting, Padita?
Well, I mean, I guess gaslighting is where you have a set of facts, right? And then you're trying to present the facts, and the other person is saying, no, those are not the facts. And then they come up with some random arbitrary thing that they're calling facts. And so now you're having to disprove something, and it's really difficult, and it will make you crazy. And a lot of times I've seen this done in court with a judge, because the judge doesn't know, what's going on in the marriage, right? Or what's going on with your child. And
Right.
so a lot of times opposing parties I've seen will gaslight the judge and say, no, 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 it was this other way. Like, I'll give you a great example. I have a case right now where, dad is saying that he is the primary caretaker of the children, and mom is saying, no, it's actually the opposite. And we found out through minors counsel that the children don't even want to go with their father. There's 3
Wow.
children. And so our argument is, if he was always the caretaker, then how come he doesn't want to go with them? How come the children don't want to go with dad now?
Right.
So it's having to disprove is really, really difficult. I mean, we had to hire um, and have the court appoint minors counsel, and that's like a third party in the divorce now that's interviewing the children. So gaslighting is very, very difficult to prove, and it's really hard, and again, this is the stuff that makes you crazy, that makes the innocent,
Mhm.
the victim, the innocent party, the survivor go crazy.
Yep. And that do you know where the term gaslighting came from?
No, actually I don't.
It's actually a movie called Gaslight. I think it was made in the 30s or 40s, and basically this woman, um and gaslighting is a kind of deception, it's a kind of lying that basically makes somebody feel like they're going crazy. You can I think I've said before, it's like coming home and showing your new car to your spouse and going, "What do you think of my new car? This car's blue." And they go, "The car's red." I go, "It's blue. I got the documentation right here. It's blue." "No, it's red." And you continue to try and talk them into the truth. "It's red." And they go, "No, no," or "It's blue." And they go, "No, no, no, it's red. It's red. I promise." Then you come home the next day. You give it up because you're not getting anywhere. You come home the next day and they go, "What a nice orange car." You go, "The car is still blue. We had this conversation yesterday. You said it was red yesterday." "No, I didn't. I didn't say that car was red." "Yes, you did. You told me it was red." "No, I didn't say anything like that." "The car is orange." "Well, the car is not orange. The car is blue." And you go on and you give that up, and then the next day you come home and go, "Boy, what a nice yellow car you have." You go, "The
Yeah.
car's blue." And it continues on like this to the point where you feel like you're going crazy. And this movie is exactly about that. This guy would move things around the house and literally made her go kind of insane. Now, if in fact it's a good watch. I did watch it really, although it can be kind of triggering for anybody who's in narcissistic abuse and has endured gaslighting real bad, but it's a really good example of what it is. So you have this gaslighting that's going on constantly in your life, and you can't ever resolve a situation. Never. Like there is no closure whatsoever in absolutely everything. For me, one of the places that most drove me nuts with gaslighting, with my ex particularly here, was she had had an emotional obsession with another man by her own definition, by the way. Those emotional obsession were her words. And I kind of never recovered from that in our marriage. And the reason I never recovered from it is I've said on past podcasts that there were times where she would be honest, They were very rare, but this was one of them where she had had this emotional obsession. And then 3 days later said, "I don't know what you're talking about," after having confessed it to me and telling me that she'd had one. So, I never did kind of move beyond this and would continue to press for closure in it. And she'd say to me one day, she'd go, "Well, I didn't emotionally abandon the relationship." I go, "No, what did you do?" I just protected myself." "Okay, well, how did you protect yourself?" "Well, I abandoned I didn't abandon the relationship. I abandoned intimacy." And I go, "Well, intimacy is something 2 people have. You kinda can't have intimacy by yourself." So, and each time I would bring this topic up, she'd have another definition for what was taking place. So, it's a friend of mine said it's like moving a cup around the table. You go, "Okay, here, the cup's in one place. This is what's going on." She go, "No, this isn't what's going on. This is what's going on." Moves the cup. Then he'd take the cup and move it again and say, "No, here we are again." 3 days after having confessed it to me, and again, I've talked about how occasionally narcissists get honest, and she did in this particular moment. And later on, I mean, she said to me 3 days later, "This never happened. I don't know what you're talking about." And for me, emotionally, it was very hard to draw close. It was hard to continue to be engaged. I knew I'd had that conversation with her, and she continued to deny it. In fact, what I hear later is, "I didn't do anything wrong. Don't know what you're talking about. Don't know who you're talking about." I tried to press for closure in our relationship because I couldn't go on without it. Ultimately, as I look back now, this was probably the demise of our relationship, the real beginning of the demise of our relationship, because I couldn't go forward knowing that she'd had an emotional obsession with another man and absolutely refused to address it or even apologize or repent over it. In fact, I'd even ask her, "Are you sorry for it?" She'd go, "No, I didn't do anything wrong." So I say, "Well, what happened in that moment? Why did you have an emotional obsession with this other man?" "Well, I didn't abandon our relationship like you're saying." I go, "Okay, well, emotional obsession is kind of abandoning the relationship. What were you doing?" "I was protecting myself." "Well, how were you protecting myself?" "Well, I don't know." "What were you protecting yourself from?" "I don't know, but I didn't do anything wrong." Then we come back and address it the next day. "Well, I didn't abandon you. I abandoned intimacy." So, well, intimacy is something I'd tell her between 2 people, so you kinda can't abandon the concept of intimacy intellectually and not abandon the person on the other side of that. And then she changed again. And it was like every time we had this conversation, the story would change. And when you're dealing with somebody who's got narcissistic abuse, that's exactly what happens, and this is what gaslighting is like. Every time you go back to a situation, every time you revisit it, you get an entirely different story trying to explain what happened, and it doesn't allow you to go heal or to move forward in any kind of way.
Why didn't you just go back to that person? Why didn't she just leave you and go back to that person she was having an emotional
I don't
affair
know.
with? Because that would have been right? I mean, like, "Sorry, John, I married you. I
Mhm,
thought I was over this other person. Let me just go and pursue that." Instead, she
mhm.
stayed with you for, like, 18 years.
Well, in her defense, she said she never saw him, and I don't understand that. If you never saw him, then it would have been kind of a blip on the radar screen, and I even told her so. I said, "There's a trust violation here." But then and if she'd like, the first conversation we had where she kinda confessed it all and it was the rare moment of honesty, to be truthful with you, I thought that was the breakthrough in our marriage. I thought if you can confess something like this and still be loved by your spouse, it'll change everything. Because I was nothing but loving. I prayed with her, I held her, I told her it would be okay, and then 3 days later, she goes, "I don't know what you're talking about. None of that ever happened." So I can remember going to a different therapist, yet a different one later, and telling her about all of this, and I said, "So she's pretending it didn't happen." I said, "And here we are 9 years later, she still says nothing happened. She still says she didn't see the guy. I don't know because she told me she had an emotional obsession with him. She said she was looking for him in stores and all of this other stuff." So when somebody tells you something like that and then they go back on it, what do you think? And the therapist said, "She's cheating on you." I'm like, "Yep, that's exactly right." And it never did get resolved. The therapist even tried to work with her on a letter, um, telling her, y y d d write a letter of confession and lay it all out to your husband," and she did, and I looked at her and I said, if you change the words in this letter, if you tell me again that you didn't do anything wrong, I will grab it and tear it up," and I had to do that because it was an exercise, it was just more gaslighting, and I was getting to the place where it was driving me crazy to try to be in this relationship with somebody who said they had an emotional obsession with somebody else, and I couldn't do it. When 3 days later, she goes, "Yeah, that never happened." And that's the kind of stuff that drives you absolutely batshit crazy.
Right, so she had this emotional affair with this person in her mind, but then she says that she never saw the person. Do you know if that's
Yes, I
true?
I have no idea, and with a narcissist, you can't ever tell. I know I've talked about before how my narcissist ex, how she said she had cancer one time. I had cancer on my back and some kind of skin cancer thing. Wasn't the worst thing, but I had cancer. When I told her, she said, "Oh, well, I had that." And I'm like, "No, you didn't. You told me you went to the therapist or went to the doctor and he removed a mole and it was not cancerous." And then she started to pretend, "No, it was cancer. It's the same exact kind you had, and I'm gonna call the doctor and tell him you made a mistake." So it occurred to me at one point in time, I go, "I don't know what the truth is." The truth is she could have she could honestly have gone to the dermatologist, had this big mole on her back, and then the dermatologist said, "Oh, that's skin cancer." And when I asked her about it, because she doesn't wanna deal with any problems in life at all, I said, "Was it cancer?" She goes, "No, it wasn't cancerous at all." So I don't know the truth.
Right.
She could have had it, but I don't think she did. And when somebody gaslights you like that, these are the kinds of things that drive you absolutely insane because you don't ever know the truth, and this person is sleeping in the same bed with you.
Right. Oh my gosh, I feel like I'm trying to make sense of it right now. I'm like,
That's
did she see him? Did she not see him? Did he know? Did she really cheat on you physically? I mean, it's crazy making. And I remember those times of crazy making with my ex-husband where I'm like, "I just tell me the truth," but they don't know the truth. They don't know how to be truthful and honest and vulnerable. They don't know, John. They just don't know it. It's just they don't know how to do it. And there's sparks of it. You're like, "Yes," but then they'll go back on what they said like a couple days later, like you said. So the blueprint of the narcissist is the same, but our stories are a little bit different. But that's how I can relate to your story that you're saying because I understand it. I went
well,
through it.
and you're trying to figure it out, right? You're trying to figure out what the hell is going on here. Did when she I can remember when she first said, "I didn't say any of that." You go, wait, what did she say? Did she did she tell me she had an emotional obsession?" And again, even just when it's the 2 of you, you go, "Wait a minute, I know we had that conversation." And if you have enough of these kinds of things happen, you stop trusting your own thinking. And it's like, I don't know what to do. I'm trying to figure all this out, and I'm unable to go do it because of this gaslighting. And the other thing we ought to talk about in this particular situation is toxic amnesia. But before we move to that, I mean, you had a really good definition for gaslighting that you wanted to read. Why don't we take to that real quick and insert that here into our podcast because we need a good definition.
Yeah, so gaslighting is the practice of psychologically manipulating someone into questioning their own sanity, memory, and powers of reasoning.
Yep, and it's done through deception. It is constantly done through deception. You say one thing, you do another. You give completely different stories about real circumstances that took place. You change the story all the time, and ultimately, it leaves your victim questioning their own reality and questioning absolutely everything about them. It really, I'm trying to figure out words to say this. It destroys your mental capacity emotionally in
Insight.
just about every area of your life. Like, you take this situation because, I mean, ideally, marriage or a relationship, if you're just in a relationship with somebody, boyfriend, girlfriend, this person is supposed to be kind of your soulmate, is supposed to be in the deepest place, and this is where the trust violation is. It's in this deep center that you've attached yourself to, and it ultimately makes you question everything around you. It affects your ability to make decisions at work. Did I get that right? Did I did we have that conversation? I thought I heard that. And you're constantly questioning yourself because you stop trusting your own thinking on the other end
Yeah.
of it.
Yes.
And you literally feel like you're going crazy. Even as I'm describing this story, I can feel a little bit of it. It's like, "Did I hear that right?" As I'm recalling it, I'm questioning myself, and I'm telling our listeners, I'm going, "Did I hear that? Am I saying that right? Did she do that?" Because it'll rattle around in your head, going back through what you know is true versus their side of the story, and there's no way to go explain it. Like, I was standing in front of that VW. How's it possible that he sees that car beige? I'm standing in front of it and I see it's green. And you have this disparity and you can't explain it and you don't know what to do with it. And ultimately, the end result is you think, yeah, I think maybe I'm going crazy. There are two of them with the same color. And the same thing happens with your spouse. Your narcissist ex and narcissist spouse. Then you add triangulation on top of that, and they involve somebody else who believes their lie. Now it's 2 and 1, and then maybe 3 on 1 if you got children involved or other family members involved. Like my narcissist ex is, I'm certain, told my parents things about me that are completely not true. My parents don't want to deal with it. So now I gotta deal with them, or I gotta deal with my kids, or I gotta deal with my sisters, and anybody this narcissist has told the story to further triangulates you and further makes you feel like you're going crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. It's it says, in the definition, psychological. It really is. It really is. And, let's give our listeners some things that we did that actually maybe helped. Kind of when we were in the thick of it. I mean, I know for me and I know for you, journaling was very important, and just to kind of write down what they've said or what happened, and then going back to it and saying, "No, no, no, I remember it because I wrote it down on
Mhm.
this day, and this is what you said, or this is what I said, and or this is what occurred." So I do recommend journaling to my clients even, and that some of them are like, "What's that?" And, some of my male clients are like, "I don't really know what that is." So I just say, "Do a timeline." Do a timeline, and, I wanna see the timeline, and do a timeline for yourself, and just to keep things, because she is gonna say something completely different, and we wanna know the facts. As attorneys, we wanna know the facts, we wanna present the facts as they are to the judge. So I think journaling or doing outlines with timetables is really, really an effective tool, so that you put it down on paper, what happened, the time, the date, and be very diligent about that. I know that that is something that definitely helped me.
Mhm. And I had something that was it was separate from a regular journal for me. I had what I called a crazy journal. Um, and the journal was specific about things that happened that my ex came back and said didn't happen. So, I'd be trying to resolve a situation, she did this, and I would come back and have a conversation, she would say this, and I would literally write down the details of the situation. And for me, at least, in order for that kind of journal to work, it had to happen. I had to write it down quickly. I couldn't go 2 or 3 days later because then you're relying on your memory. And the goal of this kind of journaling is to take it outside of your own personal recollection in your head and to put it down on paper. So when they come back to you and say, "This didn't happen," you go back in the journal and you go, "Oh, yeah, it did. In fact, on this date, it did happen." You can go back and read it, and it'll reaffirm what you know to be true instead of them giving them the opportunity to manipulate your mind in this psychological warfare. So that was
That's a
for me
great
that
point.
it has you have to do it quick. You don't wanna do it 2 or 3 days later and try and recollect it. You wanna do it immediately as soon as they start gaslighting you. You wanna have that conversation. You wanna tell what happened. You wanna write down the details of it, then put the journal away, 'cause they may tell you 3, 4, 5, 10, 20 different renditions of the same story. And you're gonna need to go back to that and you go, "Okay, wait a minute." Open up your journal. Here's the real story. Here's what actually happened. So that for me was a lifesaver, was that crazy journal. I've since burned it. I don't have it anymore, but it was very helpful. The other thing for me that I found very helpful was having people I do trust around me that I could talk to about these kinds of things. There's a guy in my office who actually was a therapist at one point in time, and we go to lunch just about every day. And he's like a brother to me in many, many ways. We've been working together for almost 2 decades now, and he's a trusted friend and soul. And and he doesn't mince words, and he's pretty quick to tell you if if the truth is different in one place versus another. So having these conversations with somebody and saying the same thing over to that person, having them kinda reaffirm back to you and tell you what they're hearing from you was also very, very helpful for me. Because if I was miscommunicating something, you can come back and say, "That's not what you said last time," because you want it to be the truth. Ultimately, this keeping yourself out of this is a search for truth. Something happens, you write it down, and you do that because you want it to be true. Then you come back later and you can go revisit the truth and you can revisit the situation, and it's helpful for you. So the same thing is happening. You're recounting this stuff to another person, and as you recount it to the other person, you're it's kinda like telling yourself again the truth because they'll tell you the inconsistencies if they're there.
Yeah, I mean, having a trusted friend is great. The problem with me is super isolated at that time. It was just
Yeah.
myself and him and, his daughter, which obviously she was too young, but, I super isolated because he isolated me from my family. Even though we lived in the same state, we lived 20 minutes away from them, he really, said so many negative things about my family that I felt like I couldn't go to them, and so I really super isolated, and that was
Wow.
very bad, very bad, and so, again, there wasn't these types of, there wasn't this community, that we have now that talks about narcissism, so I also didn't know. So it was him, his daughter, and work. Those were, like, my 3 things that,
Mm.
were priorities for me. So, you're absolutely right. If you can find someone that you really trust, um, that
Yeah.
is really invaluable.
Well, it's interesting you kinda bring that up. I mean, the goal oftentimes of a narcissist is to isolate you from other people. So it doesn't surprise me that you say, "Well, I didn't have a whole lot of people around me at the time." And if you think you're going crazy, you don't necessarily wanna be around people. Like,
Yes.
if as you start losing your own trust in your own judgment, and you're thinking, "Maybe I really am the problem. Maybe I am the one going nuts here." That's not a call to go find new friends. It's not a call to go involve yourself with other people. If you already don't trust yourself, the desire to go have a conversation with somebody else about what's really going on is nil. You just don't want to go do that. Because then if they reaffirm your craziness, then you're really, really crazy. You've already been triangulated anyways. Now you take somebody else who might be a trusted friend and they're telling you the same thing. You kind of wouldn't want to hear that. So this lack of judgment of your own mental capacity can also further isolate you from people, in addition to the narcissist doing that too. So
Yeah.
those were the things that I think mostly helped me. And then later on, was finding a therapist who happened to be a narcissist coach and understood exactly what I was going through. The problem with that is finding one. I would tell you that it's probably better to find a narcissist coach than it might be a therapist in a lot of these situations. Um, therapists, I'm not convinced that a lot of therapists really are so helpful when it comes to narcissistic abuse. A lot of the stories sound unbelievable, and maybe a lot of them are. Um, and on top of that, you already don't trust your judgment. And if you bring the narcissist in the room, that adds even a worse random element to it. Um, so I think if you are gonna find a therapist or you are going to find a coach or somebody like that, my advice to you would be this: 1, make sure they have experience in narcissistic abuse. You have to have somebody in your pocket that you are seeing that you can be honest with about all this insanity and that will help you anchor yourself. The second thing I would tell you is this: if I had it all to do over again, I'd never bring my spouse into a therapy session. Um, Although I'm grateful for the fact that she was diagnosed by my therapist as having narcissistic personality disorder or living somewhere between narcissism and borderline. They're both cluster B personality disorders. Um, I don't know that that was worth the hardship of the whole process and going through that. There's nothing, there's other than that, there was absolutely nothing of value, I think, that took place in the room with any of the counselors or therapists we saw with my narcissist ex. They're not helped. And the reason they're not helped is because they can't tell the truth. And if you don't tell the therapist the truth about what's really going on, you'll never get help. It's like saying, "Okay, help me with plan B, but I'm gonna talk about plan A." It just doesn't work. So, ultimately, that's why this whole thing kinda goes upside down, and it's really problematic. So, I wouldn't necessarily see a therapist, certainly if, you you're going with a narcissist. I just don't think that's so valuable. You can find somebody who's a coach, find somebody who's a specialist in narcissistic abuse. Yeah, it'd be completely different.
Yeah, and there's I see this a lot too. If you have children with the narcissist, there are parenting coaches that where they
Mhm.
teach you about how to, you know, parallel parent with your narcissist ex. I've talked about this a lot about getting on an app. Talking Parents is a great app. I've written 2 articles for Talking Parents. Go read those articles. It's really, really vitally important that you go low contact with these narcissists, especially if you have a child with them. If you don't have a child with them, then it's obviously a little bit easier. Like in my situation, where we filed for divorce, that took a while to get through and finalize, but it was done. Once it was done, it was done. I didn't ever have to see him again. So it's really, really, really important that you use these resources that we're talking about here on this podcast and realize that you're not crazy, that you have to protect your mental health and to go low contact with them if you have a child or no contact if you don't have a child with them. So we believe you and we want to see everybody heal and recover from narcissistic abuse, and that's why we're doing this episode.
Yeah, I can't emphasize what you said right there more. You're not going crazy. You're not going crazy. Let that sink in right now, and we believe you. You know, we haven't heard your story. Our stories are the same, and we know what you're going through, and we believe you. There is a reality. There are things that happened, and nothing will erase that. And the good news, God knows the truth, and He knows how you handle the situation, and He knows exactly what's taken place. So you're not the only one on the planet that that understands the truth of what you're going through. Find somebody else who will believe you as well in your local area. Go to a family member, a trusted friend, somebody, and begin to have these conversations. Get the journal out, go buy a little notebook at that and or do it on your phone. These days, towards the end of it, what I would do is I dictated it in a text app on my phone. You could do it that way and tell the stories there. But figure a way to go do these things so that you don't think you're going insane because living with a narcissist will drive you batty. And we'd like for you not to be in that place, especially if you're going to make decisions to leave and things like that. You have to have your wits about you. So make sure that you do that. Good conversation, Padita.
Yeah, I'm thinking it's going to be very helpful to our listeners.
I hope so. It's a hard thing to talk about. It's like I'm going crazy? Yeah. Yeah, it happens in this. That's one of the most insidious things that takes place in narcissistic abuse is they make you think you're going insane. So I'm really glad we talked about this today. Next time around, we'll be talking about going no contact and the pluses and minuses of that, pros and cons. There's a lot to talk about there. So that'll be our next conversation, our next podcast. And until then, Padideh, we'll see you again soon.
Thank you, Jon.
And have a wonderful afternoon, and always be narc-free.
Thank you for listening to the Narcissist Abuse Recovery Channel. Be sure to follow and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. To hear other episodes or read the associated blogs, visit www.narcissistabuserecoverychannel.com and be sure to follow us on Instagram with the handle narc.podcast. The guest views, thoughts, and opinions expressed are their own. The information presented is for general informational purposes only and is not intended to be legal advice. The co-hosts are not licensed therapists. Seek professional help as information is often state-specific. The Narcissist Abuse Recovery Channel is produced in studios in California and Georgia.